Proud to present Stuart Wilde and his tape on intuition.
Hello, this is Stuart Wilde. Welcome to our tape on developing the sixth sense. Everybody has a sixth sense. Everybody has the ability to pull information from beyond the five senses, a kind of personalized ESP. The reason we do is that in the olden days, many thousands of years ago, when we were originally ape men, or we came through those less sophisticated tribal societies, we had the power that nature has, and we used it instead of intellect. When you look at an animal in the forest, it doesn't have intellect and reasoning, but it does have an ability to know when there is danger. It has an ability to use that heightened sense of perception to keep itself safe. In the olden days, tribal people would get into a relationship with nature, and in so doing, they would stimulate this ability of inner knowing. And they had to have that inner knowing in order to survive. Today, in our modern society, we've moved so far from that inner knowing or sixth sense, and we've moved into a heightened state of intellectuality. The thing about intellectuality is that it has to reason through facts, and in doing so, it limits the ability to pick up information that isn't logical, that isn't necessarily from what we would normally consider the practical, factual information that is open to an individual in any one given circumstance. The first time that mankind exhibited intellectuality was when the cave dwellers began to put paintings on the sides of their caves, paintings of animals and nature and the sun and the moon. It was as if those people, seeing reality outside of themselves, began to create an intellectual representation of that reality. Those paintings had measure and form. They had color. They didn't have perspective in those days, but they had color and they had form. And so they intellectualized what they saw outside of themselves, and they put it up on the walls of the cave to act as an affirmation for them. Those tribes needed the animals in order to live, in order to eat. And they felt that if they could paint those animals on their wall, it would help them create a feeling that there would always be food in the family unit or in the tribal unit. It wasn't until a later stage in the development of humanity that intellect really got a grip of things. It has been said that Abraham was the first of the intellectual breed of mankind, that he gave mankind weight, measure, and number, and that he created this heritage of defining in intellectual terms the experience of being a human upon the earth plane. Each one of us has this sixth sense inside of ourselves. And you have had experiences, I'm sure, where you have exhibited an inner knowing without necessarily pulling that information from the storage inside the subconscious mind of the facts that you know. An example that is very common is one when the telephone rings and you know who's on the other end of the line, even though perhaps they're calling you at an odd hour of the time of day, or perhaps you're not even expecting a call from that person. Somehow, as you go to reach that phone, you know who's there. Another example of this inner knowing is sometimes exhibited in the relationship that you have with your body. You will intuitively or instinctively know that there's something wrong, or you will instinctively know what type of nutrition or what type of course of action will assist you to redress the balance in your body when it falls out of sync. Another type of sixth sense that is common to each and all of us is this feeling of knowing when danger approaches. Isn't it true that sometimes when you found yourself in a dangerous situation, or even a situation where you would experience intense uncomfort or embarrassment or difficulty, you've hesitated to go into it? And what you've done is you've somehow picked up the energy or a reading, more or less, of what the probability pattern was, and you've pulled back, then you've hesitated, and that hesitation has assisted you in not getting into difficulty. I remember when I first got involved in these concepts and I was thinking about them, I was driving my car through London, and something made me start to take left turns and right turns that were unusual to me and were not a part of the route that I was traveling. But I began to follow my instincts, and every time I felt an instinct to make a turn, I made it. And I eventually came upon a little street in the back suburbs of Putney, and as I was driving along this street, again following this sixth sense instinct of mine, I felt impelled to drive onto the forecourt of a little garage. And as I looked up, I saw that it was a place that sold tires and repaired tires. And so I was there, and I said to the attendant, "Would you mind checking the tires on my car?" And he hoisted the car up on a ramp and took a look at the tires, and on the inside tire at the front was a bubble about the size of a tennis ball, and that tire was just about to explode. And if I had been driving quickly on a motorway or on a fast-moving street, I may have been involved in an extremely unfortunate accident as the car went out of control. And he looked at the tire and he said, "God, mate, if you'd been driving this, you would have been in terrible trouble." Well, my mind did not have that fact, because that bubble of this expanded rubber of the tire was on the inside of the tire, not on the outside. But somehow, instinctively, I knew that that danger was there. How did I know? Well, that to me is the sixth sense. It is as if we are aware of so much more of what is around us, and that because we live in a world where everything is energy, the solidity of the world is not really solid. Everything out there is atoms and molecules, and if you took the entire planet and you took out what was actually solid, you could get it all into the palm of your hand, because most of physical matter is empty, and the molecules and the atoms are moving very, very quickly. And so we as humans are living in this sea of energy. And somehow, some way that we don't totally understand, that energy has a way of impinging upon us and giving us information. Developing the sixth sense is no more than becoming aware of that subtle information. You are receiving that energy all of the time. The reason why your mind is not aware of these hidden forces or this hidden energy is because, basically speaking, we have moved so far from the creative, intuitive into the intellectual that the faculty of the sixth sense has died out. The average human being in the modern world today is bombarded by stimulus. They're bombarded by color and noise. As you watch television, your eye and your brain is receiving trillions upon trillions of pieces of information all at once. There'll be a record player playing somewhere in the house, the radio will be on, the traffic's going past, somebody's talking to you, you're reading the newspaper at the same time, the cat jumps on your lap, and you're receiving all of that stimulation. When the mind is so overstimulated, as it is in our modern society today, it has difficulty differentiating what information is important and what information is insignificant. And so as you sit there watching the television with all of this cacophony going on around you, the noise of the car passing in the street is disregarded by the mind because it's getting into the habit of not bothering to make that a recognizable piece of information. You're watching the television, it's used to recognizing that. The cat jumping on your lap, it's used to recognizing that. But some of the peripheral information that's coming in is just hidden away and lost in the mind. As we developed a society that moved more and more into intellect, what we began to do is we began to develop the left brain. In human beings, most intellectual functions exist in the left brain, and most creative or intuitive functions exist in the right brain. Whichever part of the brain you develop is the part that becomes the strongest. We have an education system that develops a child's knowledge of the facts. When a person gets into a problem, we ask them to look at the problem logically. We say to them, what are the facts? If you know what the facts are, you can work your way out of this problem, is how we teach people today. So as you developed a society of people that were very intimately involved in the facts, and then you bombarded them with all this various stimulation that developed through communication and through modern technology, and you can see how we have lost our ability to pick up information or subtle energy that is not fact, that is not logic. Some people are so moved over into their intellectuality that they can't accept that it's even possible. And yet it is, And the more that you begin to concentrate upon the sixth sense, the more you'll evidence it in your life on a daily basis. Everything is energy. Everything is recognizable. All energy patterns have a thumbprint or a feeling to them. And you can begin to pick that energy up. The point is, you have to then use that information to enhance your life. You don't need a lot of superfluous information coming into your mind. You just need a sixth sense about those events in your life so that you can alter your behavior or your action plan with this expanded sense of knowing, or this expanded perception, as it's sometimes called. There's a hypothesis that's been developed over the years that the ancient people of the early Greek and early Roman times had a brain that was developed differently to the way that it's developed today. If you look at the modern brain inside a human being in our society, there's a distinct separation between the left brain and the right brain. And the brain is joined by a connection in the center, but you can look at the distinct two halves. It has been suggested that the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans had what is called a bicameral mind, meaning that the two halves of the brain were joined together. And so that human being had the intellectual creative function more predominant than the intellectual. Because first of all, in those times, the intellect was not as developed. And secondarily, when these two halves of the brain were joined together, there was a more instant access to that creative, intuitive part. And it has been suggested that the reason why the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans were constantly talking to the gods or in constant communication with the gods was in fact a factor of this bicameral mind that they had, and the fact that they were more closely linked to this intuitive sixth sense than we are today. Whether that is true or not matters not. The situation today is that the left brain is overdeveloped and the intuitive creative is usually underdeveloped. Before we go into how you're going to expand your ability to perceive this subtle information through the sixth sense, I think it would be useful for me to give you a few definitions of what the sixth sense is not. It is not psychic perception. Psychic perception is a faculty of mind. When a human has a thought or a feeling, it lays around them somewhat. And through psychic perception, you can go and you can touch that thought, and it'll pull back or give you information. The only thing about psychic perception is that when the information comes back to the psychic or to the person that has psychic abilities, it passes through the intellect and gets changed around somewhat. And so the psychic will look at a person and say to them, I think that you're going to go on a long journey. And what in fact they're doing is picking up a thought form that the person had an hour ago, which was, I'd like to buy a new car. Buying a new car is not necessarily going on a long journey. And so psychic information has a way of being right some of the time, but being wrong a lot of the time as well. And although having psychic information or having psychic perception is interesting and will help you, it is less powerful than a sense of inner knowing. Because everything in the world is energy, and because all the thought forms of man and all the feelings of man are energy, there is basically a collective energy. It is what Jung called the collective unconscious. And you are connected to that collective unconscious through your own conscious or through your own divinity or through the power that is inside your mind. You have the ability to center the intellect, to center the mind, and to begin to communicate with all of the energy that there is. The thing is that isn't a normal way of thinking. If I say to you, look at an office building in the center of a big city and tell me about it, you'll tell me the height and the structure, you'll tell me the color, you'll tell me about the windows, the way the architecture looks. You more than likely will not tell me how the building feels. But the building is energy. And in that energy, it has a feeling. The interactions of human beings can be described in the things they do. He went this far on this day and traveled this many miles. But that doesn't describe the feeling of the event. Everything that you look at out there is basically an expression of feeling. A dustbin on a corner with 3 rags hanging out of it has a feeling. A row of shops have a feeling. A restaurant has a feeling. And you know that, but it's not usual to search for the feelings in things. As we moved away from feelings into intellect, the feeling capacity died away. If there's danger in the street, that street will have a feeling of danger. You can feel the danger coming to you. And some of you may have had that experience where you've begun to feel that something is wrong in a given situation. Well, how would you know that intellectually? You don't. But when danger beckons, it has an energy that goes out ahead of itself. Even the future has an energy that's out ahead of itself. And so in developing the sixth sense, you have to be careful to understand that it is not a psychic faculty, and that the psychic faculty can often lead you into error, into information that is not correct. All of those things that you see out there that are part of that psychic world or part of that sort of expanded consciousness, tarot, astrology, crystal gazing, whatever it may be, are all one and the same in that psychic perception energy. Tarot, for example, is a tool for psychic reading. And as a person turns over the tarot cards, it allows the psychic reader a place to concentrate, something to talk about. Astrology is the same function. Astrological symbols act as a trigger in the mind of the astrologer. What we're looking at here, though, in developing the sixth sense, is you becoming intimately involved in your feelings, intimately involved in that spark of the universal law, the divine light that is within you. I call that light the higher self, and I believe that each one of us has an intimate connection to that higher self, and that through the higher self we can come gradually to a state of all-knowing. The sixth sense is a function of a developed being, a person that has worked upon their life to discover who they are. When you're not in touch with your feelings, when you're not in touch with who you really are, it is almost impossible to develop the sixth sense. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do as you move into this heightened sense of awareness is you're going to have to look at yourself. You're going to have to look and see what your motivations are, who are you, what do you feel. And as you begin to get a good, clear knowledge of who you are, then that power that's inside of you can begin to develop, can begin to become a part of your life. As you move out of the intellect, which is also, of course, the personality and the ego, you move more into the right brain, expansive, creative, limitless you. And as you do so, it is almost as if there's more of the higher self within your body and less of the ego. As you become more of that higher self, or more of that universal infinity, then your ability to feel the energy in other things is automatically enhanced. To do that, and to have this sixth sense come through, you have first to develop the five senses. Each one of your senses, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, is only developed according to how much you've concentrated on it. You can teach yourself to improve your eyesight. I heard a story of a young girl who had developed her eyesight to the point where she could see the moons around Saturn. When we use our sight, we don't think in terms of trying to be able to see more or be able to pick up more information through sight. We just automatically look at things. And all the things we see, and all of those things we miss, we presume aren't there. As you look in terms of developing the senses, what I want you to do is to get in touch with how much do you see. An exercise that I particularly like is, I'd like you to walk along a city street with a friend, and I would like you to walk looking down. And as you do look down, I want your friend to ask you from time to time to look up, and I want you to scan to the left and scan to the right, then look down again, and have your friend ask you what was in that scene. As we walk through life, we miss most of it. Most of the information out there, the brain doesn't pick it up, even though the eyes have seen it. And of course, as I said, the reason it doesn't pick it up is because we've trained it not to. Once you can begin to notice everything that's going on around you, what you're saying to the brain is, I am interested in the subtle information. I'm interested in those things that you used to think are not important. Then you begin to expand your sense of hearing. And the way that I did that was I would walk again in a city street, and I would find a couple that were walking along and talking. And I would walk just in front of them. And I would center my mind, cutting out my attention on the rest of the information that was coming in, noise of a traffic, a policeman blowing a whistle, whatever it might be, and I would walk in front of these people so that I couldn't watch them, and I would listen to their conversation. Now, perhaps that's an invasion of privacy, but basically speaking, it's a way of developing an exercise for yourself. I would listen to their conversation, and then, when that conversation was right at the very edge of my earshot, I would separate myself from them a little bit more. And because I was literally having to hear something that was coming from behind me, I wasn't able to watch their lips or pick up any other information as to their gestures or the way their face was changing or any other characteristics that they might be exhibiting. I could only listen to the sound. And what I would do is I would walk along the street, and then I would increase my pace to be slightly further in front of them so the level of the noise fell even further. And I found that by concentrating and by accentuating my ability to hear, I could move further and further away from these individuals and still hear and understand what they're saying. There are many exercises that you can develop for increasing your hearing. But basically, the way to increase it is to tell your mind that you want to increase it, that you want to concentrate on the sound. Obviously, if you're hearing impaired or that you're using a hearing aid in some kind, then that would be not such a simple process. But anyone can increase the sensibility of sight and sound by basically concentrating upon it. Then, as those two faculties begin to pull more information, and you've now told your brain that you want that information, then you're going to increase your ability through taste, touch, and smell. Let's talk about taste. How often have you ate a meal and literally not been aware that you've ate it? You've gone through the whole meal, and you honestly can't remember what it is you ate. That's because, again, you've told the mind, don't bother with that information for me. Next time you eat something, I want you to be aware of what you're eating. What does it taste like? What is the texture of the food? The heat, the coldness? How is it? And as you begin to tell your mind that you want to expand your sense of taste, literally your taste buds expand. The same is the case of touch, and the same in smell. And the way to work with smell, again, is find something that smells and move yourself away from it further and further. One way that I've used in the past is with a perfume bottle, to see how far I could get from that perfume bottle and still smell the perfume. The way to deal with touch is to be aware of the clothes that you're wearing. Because constantly our bodies are enwrapped in clothes, we have a tendency not to notice them. Try walking down the street and feeling the clothes moving on your back. Feel the way they touch your body, the fabric, the softness, the harshness, whatever it may be, and you begin to get into a heightened sense of touch. Now look what's happening. Here's this individual that is calling upon the brain to give it the sight, the sound, the touch, the taste, and the smell. And you're beginning to take that information in. The next thing that you're going to want to do is to be able to pull in this heightened sense of the five senses all at once. So walk down the street, listen to the conversation of the people behind you, notice everything that's going on, be aware of the clothes upon your body, be aware of any smells that are going past, be aware of all of the information that's there. Then as that information comes into your mind, you can recreate the senses through imagination so that you experience the feeling as well as whatever the facts were that you saw. If you can experience the feeling of a lamb frolicking in a field, as well as seeing the lamb, or smelling it, or hearing it bleating, you begin to have an image of what the total inner hidden energy of a lamb is. You're looking at the world and saying, this is the intellectual information, but what are the feelings? In the same way as every aspect of your life has a feeling. There are feelings of restriction, there are feelings of joy, there are feelings of freedom, there are feelings of difficulty. Whatever it is, your relationships, the people around you, your home has a feeling. The colors and the textures have a feeling. And as you become sensitive to the way things feel, then that intuitive faculty begins to call upon you more often. As it begins to call upon you, you're going to have to affirm that, one, you want the information, and two, that information is important to you. It is almost as if by using the sixth sense, you develop a muscle and it becomes stronger. And as you consistently call upon the sixth sense to give you that information, it's always there. It begins to develop and it begins to become a part of your life. Everything in the world has energy in it. And obviously those things that are alive have more life force energy than a rock that is inanimate. Anything that gives off life force has this thumbprint of energy and has a feeling. Human beings especially so, because they have all the life force that exudes from their body, and then they have the life force that comes from their mind and their personality and what they actually are. If you are looking for a friend, you can begin to get used to searching for the feeling of your friend. Your friend will have a characteristic, the way they speak, the shape of their face, some little characteristic that identifies them. I remember when I used to be in London and I was selling jeans, I had a customer that owned 2 shops in the same street, and the 2 shops were about maybe 500 to 600 yards apart. I would go for lunch to a small cafe that was situated directly in the middle of that street. And as I came out of the cafe, I was constantly heading after one shop, only to find that my customer was in the other shop, and I'd have to walk back down again. So I got into the habit of looking for him in my feelings as I came out of the cafe. I would stop on the pavement, and I would visualize in my imagination the shop that was at the north end of the street. And I would visualize the inside of the shop, and I would search for the feeling of my customer. And if I couldn't find it in that shop, I would then take my visualization to the other shop on the south side of the street, and I would search for him, and he would have a slightly different feeling. There would be a characteristic of him in the shop, and so I'd go to the south shop. I found that within about a week, I could be 95% correct most of the time. And if I were not correct for that 5% of the time, it was because I engaged the intellect in making the decision. And so I would think to myself, he's been in the south shop 5 afternoons in a row, so this afternoon he must be in the north shop. And of course my feelings would say to me, he's in the south shop, and I wouldn't agree and I'd head north. In fact, of course, he invariably was where my feelings told me. As you begin to pull this feeling, this intuition to you, you have to understand that it's incredibly accurate. It tells you the truth. What you have to do is keep your intellect out of the way so that you can perceive the truth, and often the truth is not logical. Often the truth is exactly the opposite of what you think is happening or what you think the answer is going to be. As you then believe it and you begin to act upon that information, then the whole of your being becomes an affirmation of the fact that you do want to expand your senses and that you will act upon it. As you walk up to an aircraft to get on it, it isn't logical for you to think that aircraft is going to crash, because by far and away the most airplanes don't crash. They fly millions upon millions of passenger miles without them ever crashing. If your feelings say to you, there's something wrong with this aircraft, then are you going to impose your intellectuality and say, I need to get to that city, I need to keep moving, I'm sure they all stay up, it should be okay, and negate the affirmation or the information that the universal law has been kind enough to give you? Once you get into the position of following your intuition, then it becomes a powerful force in your life. Not only a force that allows you to learn about yourself, but a force that you can use to allow your life to be more fluid and less centered in struggle and trying hard. The next point about developing the sixth sense is for you to increase your peripheral perception. And your peripheral perception is the energy that you perceive on the side of your eye. The eye is made up of cells known as rods and cones. The cones are in the center of the eye, the rods are to the side of the eye. The rods are more sensitive to light than the cones. I believe this is because, again, in ancient times, we came out of this energy of developing through the forest, through the tribal system, and it was important for you to be able to see a wider range of vision for your safety. But because that information isn't needed nowadays, because you're not in a forest trying to keep yourself safe, the brain cuts off most of the peripheral information, again, as being unimportant. As you begin to expand your peripheral awareness, what you're doing as an individual is you're opening yourself to more energy.
This is the end of the side. Please fast forward.
If you look at a tree, it is estimated that the power that is moving up through the trunk of a tree is equivalent to 40 horsepower. And this is so because a leaf at the top of the tree has to pull the moisture that sustains it from way, way down in the ground. So if an average tree is 60 feet tall, that leaf has to pull all the way up the tree and through the roots, and so it may be pulling moisture from 100 feet away, and that obviously takes a lot of effort. As that life force reaches the leaf, it exudes from the tree. Now normally that life force leaving the tree is not visible to the naked eye, and that is because we tend to look at the tree directly and we engage the cones of the eye. If you want to see the life force leaving the tree, you have to engage the rods of the eye, and this is done by looking at the top of the tree and looking at where basically 12 o'clock would be, and then from the 12 o'clock position moving your eye over to the right slightly and staring at the sky beside the tree in what would be approximately the 1 o'clock position. Then move your concentration back to the 12 o'clock position, but don't move your eye. And as you do so, what happens is you begin to receive the light leaving the tree at an angle, and that angle engages the rods on the side of the eye, and those rods are more sensitive. And you will see the life force of the tree exuding from it like flashing tongues of energy. And you'll be aware of the fact that there is much more out there than is normally available to the naked eye. As you begin to develop this perception of the unseen forces in the world, there are various techniques that you can use to accentuate that perception. As humans, we tend to look directly at things and we see the actual thing. For example, in the case of the tree, we look at the trunk and the branches and the leaves and we say, this is where the tree is. However, within that tree, there's also all the spaces where the tree is not, the spaces between the leaves. And so, normally, as you look at that tree, you'll only look at the tree. As you begin to expand your perceptions, you will also look at the space between the leaves, which is actually a part of the design of the tree, is it not? And so as you teach yourself to look behind the obvious reality, you begin to see these secondary realities or these secondary forms of subtle energy, and you begin to train yourself to become a part of that feeling. When I was working on these concepts, my teacher would have me go and sit on a park bench or on a bench inside a shopping center of some kind. And the exercise incorporated my sitting absolutely still. And that in itself is a discipline, because the human body is not used to sitting still. It sort of wiggles around a little bit, and the head moves, and you breathe in and out, and so on, and there's always some slight change going on. So when you ask the body to sit absolutely stock still, what happens is you are engaging it in a discipline, in an act of concentration. You are centering the mind on a task. And then what you do is you begin to watch people coming towards you. And as they come towards you, the important thing is to not have an opinion or a judgment about them. Because as soon as you have an opinion or a judgment, you begin to limit the amount of energy that you can perceive. What you perceive in life is filtered through those preconditions that you have inside the mind. So as you're sitting there on this bench or in this shopping center, just begin to practice observing people coming past you, and begin to practice not allowing the mind to have an opinion. So, if a very beautiful person walks past you, don't allow the mind to say, that's a beautiful person. If a very old person walks past you, again, don't judge their oldness. If you see a dress that you consider very pretty, stop the mind saying, isn't that a pretty dress? As you begin to train the mind not to have an opinion but to become an observer, then information coming to you comes to you in an uncluttered way. As you develop this exercise, you'll be able to pick up the feelings of the people as they walk past you. In the same way as the tree has life force exuding from it, so do people. The life force that leaves a person's body is more concentrated and more powerful than a tree's, but it is still visible. And you can even use that 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock technique that we just spoke of to see the life force around a human being. The life force was called by the Theosophists the etheric web. And within the etheric web, there are energy centers that are basically spinning vortexes of energy that the Hindus called chakras. In the center of a human's body, in the area of the heart, is the Heart Chakra. And that's where you experience feeling. And that's where you receive information in a sense of all-knowing. While you're sitting on that bench in the park or in the shopping center, and while these people are walking past you, I want you to begin to sense what the people feel like. Now, this exercise doesn't work real well if you still have an opinion. You have to be able to sense who they are without judging what they are. And the way you do this sensing technique is, as a person walks towards you, you project from your own heart chakra, from your own feelings, to their feelings. It is almost like touching them in the center of their chest with your mind. And as you touch them with your mind or with your feelings, it will respond back and give you information. You'll be able to see that people feel very, very different. For example, a nun hurrying through the shopping center will feel a lot different to a biker all dressed in leather. And that biker will feel very different to a small boy bouncing a ball, who in turn will feel different to the businessman hurrying along with his briefcase. As you begin to identify types of people, then you can develop types of feelings. And you'll be able to ascertain within your own feelings what the other people are feeling. You'll be able to see whether a person is confident or lacks confidence. You'll be able to see or feel whether their body is strong or lacks strength. You'll be able to see how they feel about their sexuality, about where they're going in life, their directedness, their discipline or lack of discipline, and you can begin to use this exercise to develop a sensitivity. Imagine if you could go to a business meeting and you could watch the feelings of those people that you're dealing with. When you offer a suggestion or you offer an idea at the meeting, you'll be able to see and watch how they react to your suggestion. And you can alter your suggestion accordingly in order to have them respond positively to what it is you want. Imagine if somebody offers you a deal. It may intellectually sound great, and you may intellectually think that the person is an honest person. However, if you can watch their feelings, you're going to know whether they're honest or not, whether or not that person has the ability to follow through in the deal that they're offering you. And so developing the sixth sense has everyday practical applications. It isn't just a party trick or a circus act that you're going to use to impress others. It is more like a silent expansion of your own perception in order for you to become a more complete, more functioning human being. Another way to develop that sensitivity is to try to spend as much time as you can out in nature. When you're in nature, you enter into a dimension or an area that is uncluttered by mind. When you walk down a city street, you have not only all your thoughts and feelings, but you have all the thoughts and feelings that impinge upon you from all the people you pass. When you touch a person, there's an energy transfer. When you look a person in the eye, there's another energy transfer. You cannot sit next to a person in the cinema without becoming a part of their feelings. If they're feeling moody, you'll become moody. If they're crying, you'll cry. If they're happy, you become happier. So, as you go out into nature, what you're doing is you're pulling yourself out of the feelings and the senses of civilization, and you're entering into an area that expresses pure life force without opinion, which is actually what you are moving towards. A human being that expresses tremendous amounts of power, tremendous amounts of perception, but that does not clutter that perception with opinion. As you walk out in nature, you can use the power of nature to clean up your emotions. It's almost as if nature absorbs emotion. In my book, The Force, I describe a technique for purifying your emotions in nature, which I would like to just repeat here. If you can find a large tree, lean up against it and put your hands behind your back. Imagine all of that life force going through the tree and pull it down through your body. Allow the life force of the tree to literally wash the life force that you have as a human. If you're very, very sensitive, you'll feel the life force in your body gently rocking. It'll take only 3 or 4 minutes, and then eventually you will not be able to absorb any more life force. What happens in this exercise as you visualize the energy coming through the tree and then down through your body is, it has a way of purifying what you are, and it makes you more like nature. As you can become this mirror image or this mirror energy of naturalness, then subtle unseen forces coming towards you can impact upon that mirror. It is almost like a hot breath on a mirror on a cold morning. It's very subtle, but you can see it. And that's the kind of perception that you're going to need in order to make the sixth sense work. By being out in nature, you purify yourself, and also you begin to enter into an altered state of consciousness that comes from the relaxation. Not only are the negative ions of the forest refreshing and allow you a rejuvenation, but the calm and the peace that's there allows you to enter into a dimension of calm inside your feelings. If you are very emotionally disturbed, your ability to perceive through the sixth sense is drastically reduced. If you're out of control, or you're hurrying, or you're engaged in a problem, again, it is reduced. The way that you pick up the sixth sense is to either have the mind centered or to be extremely relaxed. It was said that Einstein got his best ideas shaving. And the reason why was, as he began to shave, he would center the left brain or his intellect on the act of shaving. And as he went into this process of shaving, he would enter into a state of relaxation. It would be just a methodical act of shaving himself. As he began to do that, the left brain is engaged in the act of shaving, the entire body begins to relax, and the intuition can come around the mind and give you information. That divinity within you, the higher self, isn't an energy that you'll ever really be aware of. It doesn't hit you on the head with a plank, but it comes around the mind like a wind. And the energy of that intuition or that higher self is very, very subtle. In order for you to perceive it, you have to have had the ability to relax yourself automatically, and also the ability to quieten the chatter of the mind. There are many techniques that you can use to learn to quieten the chatter of the mind, meditative techniques. But basically, whichever one of those you choose, what you're looking at is trying to establish a discipline over your mind so that you can enter into a neutral state of being, a point where you melt into being a part of all things. You melt into the infinity of this sea of energy around you that we call the physical plane. To do that, you will have to go beyond judgment. I've talked about judgment at length in some of my other tapes, but I would like to just give you a couple of points about judgment as they appertain to the sixth sense. The mind has a set of information inside of it that it has collected through your experience in life. And that set of information is approximately the sum total of everything you've ever experienced, plus what the mind feels about those experiences. As you receive reality coming at you at the speed of light, the mind will sift that reality for those things that it understands or is interested in. And so what happens is that as information comes to you, there's a tendency for you to cut out very large percentages of it. Not only because you're not used to looking at the whole picture, like the spaces in the leaves, but because the mind concentrates only on those things that it understands and that it is interested in. When you can come out of judgment, you disengage the mind from having an opinion. Criticism is obviously a form of judgment, is it not? Opinion is also a form of judgment. And of course we teach our children at school that in order for them to be a bright and clever child, they have to have an opinion. But in fact, the least opinions that you can have, the more open you are to energy. This doesn't mean that you're going to become a weak, totally not directed individual. It just means that you're going to reduce the amount of emotion or energy that you have in any one given situation. As you pull out of judgment, what happens is it allows the mind to quieten. Most of what the mind is doing is giving you its opinion of any one given circumstance. And as you teach it not to do that, you become this antenna for consciousness, and these subtle energies can come in. And so as you walk through the forest in the early morning, I want you to A, not judge anything that you see, and B, open your feelings to receive as much energy as possible. You're looking to understand symbols, because that is how these inner worlds communicate. And one of the symbols that you'll be most used to are the symbols within your dreams. I think in order for you to become a sensitive individual, you have to begin to remember your dreams. And people will say to you, but I never dream. But in fact, that's not the case. There are two types of people. There are the people who remember their dreams and people who do not remember their dreams. But everybody dreams. And people have, on average, in any 8 hours of sleep, 400 major dreams each night. They also have hundreds and hundreds more little dreams or little thought forms, like little rivulets of energy that are in there as well as the dreams. But they have 400 dreams a night. As you begin to set up a program to recall your dreams, what you're going to teach yourself is the ability to look at symbols and understand them. Because you're so bombarded with information during the day, our dreams have become unimportant. In the olden days, when there wasn't any television, people would look at dreams, and dreams would be a major part of their life. The way to set up that dream recall is to basically tell the mind that you want to remember. And so before you go to bed at night, you may just want to put up in your mind a little meditation that would say something like, I want to remember my dreams tonight. And you set up a little notepad and a pencil, and perhaps you might like to title it My Dream Book, and you put that beside the bed. The whole energy of preparing yourself to remember your dreams allows the mind to assist you to recall it. Another way that you can get into dream recall is to set your alarm clock for the middle of the night, and so you'll be disturbed within the dreaming process. As you begin to recall your dreams, you can begin to understand that you're calling upon the mind to give you those symbols. As soon as you wake up, whatever dream is in your memory, write it down in as much detail as you can. There's no point at that time in trying to interpret or to understand the dream. All you're trying to do in those first few moments is to write down as much of the dream as you can before it slips from the mind. You leave the dream in your notebook, and then later in the day, or the next day, you return back into the same relaxed state in which the dream occurred. Most dreams are in the alpha brainwave pattern, which is from 7 to 14 cycles per second of oscillation. That means that the neurons in the brain will be oscillating 7 to 14 times each and every second. If you then relax your body and go back into a meditation, you can then go through the dream and you can begin to understand it. The way that Fritz Perls developed dream interpretation allows you to make each symbol in the dream a part of yourself. Let me give you one of his examples. Let us say you dreamt of yourself walking along the road with a fishing rod, and up ahead of you is a bridge. The way that you would begin to understand the symbol of yourself, the road, the rod, the bridge, is to put yourself into each one of those symbols. And so you say to yourself, I am walking down this road in my dream, and I have a fishing rod over my shoulder. This fishing rod symbolizes to me, and as you begin to explain what it symbolizes to you, providing you're in a relaxed alpha state of brain, the mind will click forward what fishing rod means to you. If you buy a dream interpretation book, they will talk to you about the archetypal symbols that are in the psyche of mankind. However, a black cat to you may mean something totally different than a black cat to me. A fishing rod to one person may be something else to somebody else. And so as you go through the dream, you go through all the way as the fishing rod. Then you come back and you say, I am the road that the dreamer is walking on. And of course, in this case, the dreamer is you. So you'll say to yourself, I am the road that I'm walking on. And I symbolize, and then the road in the dream tells you what it means. Then you move on to the bridge, and so on. And bit by bit, you can put all the characters in the dream and all the symbols in the dream into your mind and ask your mind personally, hey, what does this symbol mean? As you begin to communicate with the unconscious and you begin to ask it what these symbols mean, it begins to communicate with you. It is almost as if by the very fact that you've gone into the library is enlivened by your presence. As you begin to develop dream recall, and as you begin to watch your symbols, one of the things you will discover is that dreams tend to be overemphasized. They're ghoulish, the characters are huge and large, and often their dreams will be very violent in their nature. Don't be squeamish. It's just the mind's way of expanding a point. Remember, the inner mind can't talk to you in dialogue. It has to talk to you in these symbols, and in order for you to get it, the inner mind exaggerates these symbols in order that it impacts your consciousness. As you learn to recall your dreams, then what you're saying is, I'm interested in seeing the symbols. I'm interested in understanding what things mean. Going through life, you will see an exact replica of your own thoughts and feelings, and there will be a synchronistic link between what you feel and think and what you see around yourself. One example that I remember is that Freud was involved in psychoanalyzing a patient, and as he was psychoanalyzing this particular patient, the patient was talking about a scarab beetle in Egypt. And as the patient was talking about this scarab beetle, a beetle flew in through the window or came in through the window. So in other words, you could see that in the externalized reality, there was the beetle coming through the window, and in the internalized reality of the patient, they were talking about a beetle. Everybody's had that kind of experience. And it really happens because life so much reflects what you're thinking and what you're feeling. As you get good at remembering your dreams, you can then begin to pick up what the symbols mean in the life around you. And so if a one-legged tramp comes up to you and drops an orange peel onto your foot at the bus stop, to the unconscious person that means nothing. To a person that is seeing life as a symbol of herself or himself, they're going to want to go into that symbol and say, what does this mean to me? Obviously, that symbol of this tramp dropping an orange peel upon your foot may mean a lot of different things to different people, but the fact that you were there to see it means that it meant something to you. And so you can see that in this sixth sense process, we're looking to engage the mind more and more in understanding, in picking up information. In order to do that, you have to have discipline. That's not only physical discipline over your body, a good regimen of nutrition and exercise, but you have to have discipline to control your entire life pattern. If when you express an emotion, it has a way of creating a very jagged pattern in the life force or the feelings around you. It looks like the edge of a saw. And as that jagged pattern is expressed around you, it has a way of breaking up the way that you view reality. Remember, reality is coming towards you at the speed of light. And as it's coming towards you at the speed of light, it has to pass through this cloud of feelings that's around you. If the cloud of feelings are operating in this very jagged mode of intense emotion, the jaggedness of the emotion has a way of refracting reality. And you can experience that in your daily life. On an occasion when you are upset, you'll find that things around you begin to go wrong. Your upsetness, or the upset in your life, begins to alter the physical environment that you live in. Things begin to break down. The toaster doesn't work. The car won't start. You'll be driving along a city street at the speed limit, perfectly natural, perfectly calm, and things will start to jump out at you. A cat will run across the road. Somebody will jump the traffic light. It's because the jaggedness of the emotion rattles the ability or the stability of the environment around you. And so as you're looking to become more sensitive and to increase your perceptions, you have to have a control of that emotion because of the way that it alters the feeling base. You also have to have a control of the mentality, as discussed, because if the mind is chattering on with its intellectual blah, 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 again, how are you going to be sensitive to something else? It would be almost like two people talking to you at once. You can't concentrate on both people. Once the mind is quiet, you can pick up the information you want. I think also, as a part of this developing the sixth sense, you have to be a rounded off, powerful individual. And that is very much a process of you believing in yourself and beginning to develop an independence that includes your having your own philosophy of life, your own experience. A person that has worked upon themselves has gone into their feelings and clairvoyantly discovered what it is that they believe. By going in there and discovering who you are, the whole process begins to enhance the energy. You begin to resonate with more and more and more life force. Because you're disengaging from the emotion of the world, you're disengaging from all the intellectual chatter, your body's strong, and you're developing an independence that is beyond the earth plane. The other thing that blocks intuition, of course, is fear, and it goes almost without saying, because after all, what is fear if it isn't intense negative emotion? As you become confident, then all of a sudden that fear begins to fall away. And as you learn to dissipate the fear in your life, then you become more and more centered, more and more real as a person. You're more in touch with your own feelings, and so you can also be more in touch with the feelings of the people that you interact with. One of the things that I think is important in developing the sixth sense is developing a discipline of meditation and prayer. Any time that you can pull out of the world into a quiet place where you will not be disturbed, you're basically closing down the mind. And as you go into meditation, and the meditation doesn't have to be sort of cross-legged, chanting your ohms or whatever. It can be just sitting in the chair quietly, listening to some classical music, or walking around a garden, or swimming in a river, whatever it might be. But as you pull out of the world and you come in touch with yourself, then your power begins to grow. One of the things that's useful to do is to visualize light streaming through the chakras of the body. There's one on top of the head, the crown chakra, one in the area of the center forehead, the third eye chakra, one at the throat chakra, and of course the heart chakra that I've already mentioned. I won't go into the other lower chakras as they deal with physicalness and sexuality and are not a part of developing the sixth sense. As you see light flowing through the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown, it has a way of engaging you in more life force. And so you can sit in a meditation in silence, quieten your mind, relax your body, and visualize this light flowing through you. As it begins to flow through you, you can direct it to all parts of your body to lighten and enliven the molecules and atoms of your body. And as you see yourself becoming this light being, what you're saying is, I am pure life force. I am pure consciousness. And that consciousness is all around me. So the connectedness that I have within myself, being centered, being in the higher self, is a connectedness that I automatically experience with all things. As you develop sanctuary and meditation, it allows you the ability to understand yourself. And that's the key to developing the sixth sense. It is basically how big can you become as an individual? How magnanimous can you become? How non-judgmental, how loving? I believe the test of a person's spiritual growth is how magnanimous are they? How open can they become? A person that is very centered in the ego or the intellect is usually tight and restricted and not open. A spiritual person has begun to come out of feeling real, feeling they are what they are without any excuses. As you begin to develop non-judgment in relation to the things you see, you're also going to have that for yourself. You're not going to judge yourself. You're not going to deal with guilt or emotion about your life. You're going to grant yourself the patience and the time to improve gradually at your own pace. If you are developed and if you have worked upon yourself, then suddenly you begin to accelerate the pace at which you can accept energy. All energy is around you all of the time. All we're looking at is opening to receive more. And that opening process, of course, makes you feel somewhat vulnerable because you have to leave go a little bit of your personality. You have to allow the personality to move off its dominant position and allow the God force or the life force to express from within you. And that, I think, is the key to developing the sixth sense, is to develop this sensitivity where you are prepared to be real, where you are prepared to open. As that power grows inside you, you will be amazed at the perceptions that you will develop. And those perceptions will be there to assist you to grow as an individual. If you use a heightened sense of perception to restrict others or to manipulate others, or if you use that energy against them, it has a way of closing you down and making you even more negative. The way to do it is to allow those perceptions to grow within you, and then to go out into the world and use those perceptions in a loving way, a way that supports you to become a more powerful individual, and a way that supports those loved ones and those people that are pulled to you to also become more powerful, more loving individuals. The power of the sixth sense has been handed down since the beginning of time. It is your heritage. And if you will put in the dedication and the discipline, if you will work on noticing the world, on expanding your perceptions, on quietening the mind, that sixth sense will come through your feelings at a great pace. You'll have that power as part of the totality and the magnificence that you are now becoming. Thank you.